I still remember the exact shade of grey the courtroom walls were painted, like the color of ash after everything you love has burned to the ground. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the defendant's table just to keep them still. Across the aisle, Marcus sat with his lawyer, a man in a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Marcus didn't even look at me. He just stared straight ahead with that cold, calculated expression I'd come to know so well over the past 8 months. The man I'd spent 17 years loving, building a life with, creating 2 beautiful children with, he looked at me like I was a stranger. No, worse than a stranger. Like I was an obstacle he was finally removing from his path. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. And if this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt like your entire world collapsed in a single moment, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories like this in the description box below. Stories of survival, of finding strength when everything falls apart. Because that's what this is really about. The judge was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked tired, like she'd seen 1,000 broken families parade through her courtroom and ours was just another number on her docket. She shuffled through papers while my lawyer, Janet, a kind woman I could barely afford, whispered something to me about staying calm no matter what happened. But how do you stay calm when your entire life is being dissected and distributed like assets in a bankruptcy? Mrs. Foster, the judge said, finally looking up at me. I've reviewed all the evidence presented, including the financial records, the psychiatric evaluations, and the testimonies from both parties. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Beside me, Janet squeezed my forearm gently. Based on the evidence presented, the judge continued, her voice flat and administrative, I'm awarding primary physical custody of Lily Foster, age 14, and Mason Foster, age 11, to their father, Marcus Foster. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Across the aisle, I heard Marcus exhale, not in relief, but in satisfaction. Like he'd just won a particularly challenging game of chess. No, I whispered. No, please. Furthermore, the judge continued, not even acknowledging my distress, regarding the division of marital assets, the property located at 4827 Lakeshore Drive, valued at approximately $11 million, will remain in Mr. Foster's possession as it was purchased prior to the marriage with family inheritance funds, as documented. I couldn't breathe. The mansion, our home, where I'd raised my children, where I'd planted roses in the garden and hung Christmas lights every December and painted murals in the nursery, wasn't even mine. Had never been mine. Marcus's lawyer had somehow produced documentation I'd never seen before, trust documents and family papers that proved the house had always been held in a family trust. How had I not known? How had I lived in that house for 15 years and never known it wasn't really ours? The answer, of course, was that Marcus had hidden it from me, just like he'd hidden so many other things. Mrs. Foster will be awarded $48,000 from the liquid marital assets, along with her personal vehicle and belongings. Visitation with the children will be supervised, once per month, pending completion of the court-mandated psychological evaluation. Supervised visitation. Once per month. For my own children. I couldn't hold back the sob that escaped my throat. Janet was talking, saying something about appealing, about fighting this, but her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. The whole room was spinning, tilting, like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. When the judge dismissed us, I tried to stand but my legs wouldn't cooperate. Janet had to help me up, her arm around my waist, murmuring reassurances that I couldn't even process. As we turned to leave, I made the mistake of looking at Marcus. He was smiling. Not a big smile, just a small upturn at the corner of his mouth, the kind of smile that said he'd gotten exactly what he wanted. And then he leaned over to his lawyer and said, loud enough for me to hear, "She'll never see those kids again." Not really. He laughed. Actually laughed. Something inside me cracked in that moment. Not broke. Breaking implies something sudden and clean. This was more like a fault line opening up, slow and inevitable, revealing a chasm I hadn't even known was there. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to run across that courtroom and claw that smug expression off his face. I wanted to demand answers. Why had he done this? What had I done to deserve this? How could the man who'd whispered "I love you" in the delivery room while I birthed his children now take those same children away from me with a smile on his face? But I didn't do any of those things. I just let Janet guide me out of the courtroom, down the hallway with its fluorescent lights and scuffed linoleum floors, out into the parking lot where the October sun was shining like the world hadn't just ended. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. It's not just pain, it's disorientation. Like the ground rules of reality have suddenly changed and no one told you. Please, if this is hitting home for you, leave a comment. Tell me your story. And check the description box for more stories like this, because sometimes just knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. The next 3 days were a blur. I had 2 weeks to move out of the mansion, the home I'd thought was mine. Marcus had already changed the locks. His lawyer informed me through a curt email. I'd be allowed supervised access to collect my belongings on 3 designated days, with a security guard present to ensure I didn't damage or remove any property that belonged to Mr. Foster. I drove to the mansion on the first collection day in my 12-year-old Honda Civic, the personal vehicle the judge had awarded me. It looked absurd parked in the circular driveway of that estate, like a toy car in front of a palace. The security guard, a broad-shouldered man named Rick, met me at the door with a clipboard and a neutral expression that probably masked pity. "You've got 4 hours, he said. "Just your personal items and anything you can prove you brought into the marriage." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and walked into my own home like a stranger. Everything looked the same. The cream-colored walls I'd chosen, the chandelier I'd hung in the foyer, the family photos still displayed on the mantel, Lily's school picture from last year, Mason's soccer team photo, a picture from our 10th anniversary when we'd gone to Napa, and everything had still been good, or at least I'd thought it was good. How much of my marriage had been a lie? How long had Marcus been planning this? I walked through the house in a daze, trying to figure out what to take. Clothes, obviously. Some photo albums, though Marcus's lawyer had specified I could only take photos that were exclusively of me or that I had personally taken. Books from the study, a few pieces of jewelry that had been my grandmother's. Everything I'd built my life around, the furniture I'd chosen, the art I'd collected, the kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals, none of it was mine. I found myself standing in Lily's room, looking at the purple walls we'd painted together when she was 9, at the posters of her favorite bands, at the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was a baby sitting on her bed. I picked it up, held it to my chest. Rick said gently from the doorway. "That belongs to the child. You can't take it." I put the elephant back, my hands shaking. "When can I see them?" I asked. "My children. When can I see them?" Rick shifted uncomfortably. "I don't have that information. You'd need to check with your lawyer." I did check with Janet. She told me Marcus had requested, and been granted, a 30-day period before supervised visitation began to allow the children to adjust to their new custody arrangement. 30 days without seeing Lily and Mason. 30 days of them living in that house with their father, probably being told God knows what about why Mommy wasn't there anymore. I called both their cell phones. Marcus had already disconnected them and gotten them new numbers. I tried to message them on social media. Their accounts had been deleted or blocked. I sent letters through Janet. They were returned, unopened, with a note from Marcus's lawyer about unauthorized contact during the adjustment period. He'd erased me. Systematically, completely, with the cold efficiency of someone deleting files from a computer. By the end of that second week, I'd moved my belongings, which fit embarrassingly easily into my car and a small U-Haul trailer, into a storage unit in Cleveland. I had nowhere to go. The $48,000 wouldn't last long, not with lawyer fees and rent and basic living expenses. I'd been a stay-at-home mother for 15 years. My resume had a giant gap in it that no employer wanted to overlook. My parents were dead. My sister lived in California with her own family and barely had room for herself, let alone a houseguest indefinitely. I sat in my car in that storage facility parking lot, surrounded by everything I owned in the world, and realized I had absolutely nothing and no one. That's when I remembered Daniel. Daniel Reeves. My late husband. My first husband. Yes, Marcus was my second marriage. I know what you're thinking. How did I not mention that earlier? But that's how trauma works, I think. It fractures your memory, makes you skip over the painful parts even when you're trying to tell the whole truth. Daniel had died 6 years ago, suddenly and without warning. A heart attack at 41, in his office downtown. He'd been gone before the ambulance arrived. We'd been married for 9 years. We'd had a good life, not wealthy like the life I'd had with Marcus, but comfortable. Happy, or at least I'd thought so at the time. Daniel had left me the house we'd bought together in Ohio, a modest 3-bedroom in a Cleveland suburb called Lakewood. After he died, I couldn't bear to live there anymore. Everything reminded me of him. So when I met Marcus 2 years later at a grief support group, ironic, I know, and he'd swept me off my feet with his charm and his money and his promises of a fresh start, I'd rented the Lakewood house out to tenants. The rental income had been deposited automatically into an account I barely looked at, money that was technically mine, that the divorce couldn't touch because it had come from before my marriage to Marcus. The tenant's lease had ended 3 months ago. The house had been sitting vacant ever since. I drove to Lakewood in the dark, arriving close to midnight. I hadn't been back to this house in over 4 years, not since the last time I'd done a routine inspection. It looked smaller than I remembered, a little run down. The grass needed cutting. Some of the siding was coming loose. But it was mine. Fully, legally, undisputedly mine. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. It smelled musty, like stale air and old carpet. The tenants had left it mostly clean but empty. No furniture, no curtains, nothing but echoes and memories. I walked through the dark rooms with my phone flashlight, and it all came back to me. Daniel making pancakes in that kitchen on Saturday mornings. Daniel falling asleep on the couch watching baseball. Daniel painting the bedroom that soft blue color I'd wanted, getting paint in his hair and laughing about it. Daniel, who'd loved me simply and truly, without games or manipulation or hidden bank accounts. I'd been so eager to leave this house behind, to move on from the grief. And what had I moved on to? A bigger house, yes. A wealthier husband, yes. But also a man who'd been planning my destruction while I'd been planning our daughter's 14th birthday party. I made my way down to the basement, still using my phone for light. The electricity had been turned off. I'd need to get it reconnected tomorrow. The basement was unfinished, with a concrete floor and exposed ceiling joists, the kind of space you use for storage and laundry and not much else. The old furnace sat in the corner, a hulking metal beast that probably needed replacing. I was about to head back upstairs when something caught my eye. Behind the furnace, partially hidden in shadow, there was a gap in the wall. Not a gap exactly, more like a seam. Like there was something behind the drywall. I almost didn't investigate that night. I was exhausted, emotionally destroyed, running on nothing but adrenaline and grief. But something pulled me toward that gap behind the furnace. Maybe curiosity, maybe just the desire to focus on anything other than the courtroom and Marcus's laugh and the fact that I wouldn't see my children for 30 days. I squeezed into the narrow space between the furnace and the basement wall, cobwebs catching in my hair. Up close, I could see it clearly now. Someone had cut a section of drywall, maybe 3 feet wide and 5 feet tall, and fitted it back into place so carefully that you'd never notice it unless you were looking from just the right angle. There were no hinges, no obvious handle. Just the faintest outline of a rectangle. I pushed on it gently. It didn't budge. I pushed harder, and heard a soft click. The section of wall shifted inward about an inch, then stopped. There was something blocking it from opening further. My heart was racing now, though I couldn't have said why. It was probably nothing, just an old access panel for plumbing or electrical work. But in that moment, standing in the dark basement of my dead husband's house, my phone flashlight casting strange shadows, it felt like something more. I put my shoulder against the panel and pushed with my full weight. Whatever was blocking it scraped across the floor, and suddenly the panel swung open into darkness. Cold air rushed out, carrying a smell that was different from the rest of the basement, drier, less musty. I pointed my phone light into the opening. It was a room. A hidden room, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, with finished walls and a ceiling. How had I never known this was here? I'd lived in this house for 9 years with Daniel. We'd done laundry in this basement every week. We'd stored Christmas decorations down here. How had I never noticed? But then again, I'd lived in an $11 million mansion for 15 years without knowing it was held in a trust. Maybe I was just fundamentally unobservant. Or maybe the men in my life had been very, very good at keeping secrets. I stepped into the hidden room, my phone light sweeping across the space. There was a desk against one wall, an old wooden thing with drawers. A folding chair. Some shelves with boxes on them. And on the wall directly across from the entrance, mounted at chest height, was a safe. Not a small safe, like the kind you keep in a bedroom closet for jewelry and birth certificates. This was a serious safe, the kind you'd see in a movie, steel, with a digital keypad and a handle. It was easily 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide. I stood there staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Daniel had built a hidden room in our basement and never told me. Daniel, who I'd thought I knew inside and out, who I'd mourned for 6 years as the love of my life, had kept this space secret from me. Why? What was in that safe? I walked over to it, my legs feeling strange and disconnected, like they belonged to someone else. I reached out and touched the keypad. It lit up immediately, glowing blue in the darkness, still powered, somehow. Maybe it had a battery backup. The display showed a simple prompt, enter code. I tried the obvious things. Our wedding anniversary, the 14th of May, 2005. The keypad beeped and flashed red. Wrong code. Daniel's birthday, the 23rd of November, 1975. Red again. My birthday, the 3rd of August, 1978. I punched it in, expecting another rejection. The safe beeped 3 times, and I heard a heavy clunk as the locking mechanism disengaged. My birthday. The combination was my birthday. My hands were shaking again as I grabbed the handle and pulled. The safe door swung open with surprising ease, and I pointed my phone light inside. There were documents. Folders, envelopes, notebooks. A small box. And right on top of everything else, a letter in a white envelope with my name written on it in Daniel's handwriting. *Emma. I picked it up with trembling fingers. The envelope wasn't sealed. I pulled out the letter, 2 pages, front and back, covered in Daniel's precise handwriting. The date at the top was March 3rd, 2018. A little over a month before he died. I had to read the first line 3 times before my brain could process what it said. If you're reading this, Emma, then I'm dead and you've found the room. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I'm about to tell you. If you're still watching this, if you're hanging on to find out what that letter said, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what I found in that letter, what I learned about the man I'd thought I knew, it changed everything. Not just about Daniel, but about my entire life. And if you want to know how this story ends, you need to hear all of it. Check the description for more stories like this. Stories about secrets, betrayal, and the shocking truths we discover when we think we've lost everything. I sank down onto the concrete floor right there, my back against the wall, and I read. *Emma*. If you're reading this, I'm dead and you've found the room. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I'm about to tell you. I've been lying to you for our entire marriage. Not about loving you, that was always real. But about almost everything else. My name isn't Daniel Reeves. It's Daniel Kowalski. I changed it legally when I was 25, before we met. I changed it because I was running from something. From someone, actually. From a lot of someone's. I grew up in Chicago, in a family that was involved in things I don't want to burden you with the details of. Bad things. Illegal things. When I was 24, I testified against my own uncle in a federal racketeering case. I went into witness protection, got a new identity, started over in Cleveland. Asterisk. Asterisk, I thought I was safe. I thought I could have a normal life. And then I met you, and you were so good, Emma. So kind and normal and untouched by all the ugliness I'd come from. I fell in love with you so fast it scared me. I knew I should tell you the truth, but I was terrified you'd leave. So I kept the secret. I kept it through our dating, through our engagement, through our wedding. I kept it even as I lay beside you at night, knowing I was living a lie. Asterisk. Asterisk, and then, 6 months ago, I found out they found me. The people my uncle worked for. They knew where I was. I don't know how, maybe a leak in the U.S. Marshal's office, maybe just bad luck, but they knew. Asterisk. Asterisk, I've been preparing for this, Emma. This room, this safe, it's all for you. Because I won't let them hurt you. Even if they kill me, I won't let them touch you. Asterisk. Asterisk, inside this safe, you'll find everything you need. Documentation of my real identity, copies of my testimony, names and contacts for the FBI agents who handled my case, and most importantly, evidence. Evidence of everything my uncle's organization has done since my trial. Evidence I've been collecting secretly for years, insurance to keep myself, and you, safe. Asterisk. Asterisk, but here's the thing I need you to understand. If I'm dead and you're reading this, it means I failed. It means they got to me. And if they got to me, they might come for you too, looking for this evidence. Asterisk. Asterisk, I've set up protections. The FBI contacts know about you. If I die unexpectedly, they'll be watching. But you need to be careful, Emma. You need to be smart. Asterisk. Asterisk, there's money. $300,000 in bearer bonds, in the metal box at the bottom of the safe. That's yours, no questions, no taxes, completely clean and legal. Use it to start over if you need to. Use it to protect yourself. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm also leaving you a name, Marcus Foster. He's a friend, Emma. Someone I trust. We served in the army together, years ago, before all the witness protection stuff. He doesn't know about my past, but he's a good man. If you need help, if you need someone to turn to, you can trust him. Asterisk. Asterisk, I know this is overwhelming. I know you'll have questions, and I won't be there to answer them. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all of it. But please know that everything I did, every lie I told, was because I loved you more than I've ever loved anything in my life. Asterisk. Asterisk, be safe, my Emma. Be happy. And please, if you can, try to forgive me. Asterisk. Asterisk, Daniel. Asterisk. I read the letter 3 times, sitting there on the cold basement floor, before I could even begin to process it. Daniel had been in witness protection. Daniel had testified against organized crime. Daniel had been living under a false identity our entire marriage. Daniel had left me $300,000. And Daniel had given me Marcus's name as someone I could trust. Marcus. My second husband. The man who'd just taken my children and my home and my life. Daniel had specifically told me to trust Marcus. How? How had Daniel known Marcus? Why had he recommended him to me? And more importantly, had Marcus known about Daniel's real identity all along? My mind was spinning, trying to fit these pieces together. I'd met Marcus at a grief support group 2 years after Daniel died. Marcus had been there mourning his father. We'd bonded over our losses, over the shared experience of grief. He'd been so kind, so understanding. He'd taken me to dinner. He'd listened to me cry about Daniel. He'd introduced me to his children from his first marriage, Lily and Mason, who I'd later adopted and raised as my own. Wait. No. That wasn't right. Lily and Mason weren't Marcus's children from a previous marriage. They were our children. We'd had them together. Why had I just thought? I pressed my hands to my temples, trying to clear my head. I was exhausted. Traumatized. I wasn't thinking straight. Of course Lily and Mason were my biological children. I'd given birth to them. I'd been there for their first steps, their first words, everything. But the confusion lingered, a nagging sense that something wasn't adding up. I pushed it aside and looked back into the safe. The letter was just the beginning. There were files, dozens of them. I pulled them out carefully, spreading them across the concrete floor. Financial records. Photographs of men I didn't recognize. Transcripts of wiretapped conversations. Names, dates, locations. A whole network of criminal activity, meticulously documented. And underneath it all, just like Daniel had promised, a metal box. I opened it with shaking hands. Stacks of bonds, each one worth thousands of dollars. I didn't count them all, but at a glance, Daniel hadn't been lying. There had to be close to $300,000 here. $300,000. Money that was completely mine, that Marcus didn't know about, that the divorce court had never touched because I hadn't even known it existed. For the first time since the courtroom, I felt something other than despair. I felt a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. Or maybe it was something darker, calculation, strategy. I thought about Marcus's laugh. About his smile in that courtroom. About the way he'd looked at me like I was nothing. Asterisk, she'll never see those kids again. Not really. Asterisk. I gathered up the documents, carefully placed them back in the safe, but I took the metal box with the bearer bonds. I also took Daniel's letter, folding it carefully and putting it in my pocket. When I finally emerged from that hidden room, squeezing back out past the furnace into the main basement, I checked my phone. It was 3:47 a.m. I'd been down there for hours. I climbed the stairs to the main floor and sat in the empty living room, on the floor because there was no furniture, and I thought about everything I'd learned. Daniel had kept massive secrets from me, but he'd also left me tools for survival, money, information, connections. Marcus had destroyed my life in a matter of months, taken everything from me with cold calculation. But he didn't know about this house, about this room, about these resources. And Daniel had specifically mentioned Marcus in his letter. Had told me Marcus was someone I could trust. But that had been written 6 years ago, before I'd ever met Marcus in person. Before we'd married. Before everything had fallen apart. What was the connection? How had Daniel known Marcus would come into my life? Or had Marcus engineered our meeting somehow? The questions were endless, spiraling, making my head hurt. But underneath all the confusion and exhaustion, a new thought was forming. A dangerous thought. Marcus thought he'd won. He thought he'd taken everything from me and left me with nothing. But he was wrong. I had secrets now. I had resources. And I had nothing left to lose. If he wanted to play games, if he wanted to destroy me, I would show him what a woman with nothing left to lose could do. I slept on the floor that first night in the Lakewood house, wrapped in a blanket from my car. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the bare windows, and for a confused moment I didn't know where I was. Then it all came back, the courtroom, Marcus's laugh, the hidden room, Daniel's letter. I lay there for a while, staring up at the ceiling, and I made myself face the truth. My life as I'd known it was over. The mansion, the comfortable existence, the identity I'd built as Marcus Foster's wife, all of it was gone. Even my children had been taken from me, at least for now. But I wasn't dead. I wasn't broken beyond repair. And I had $300,000 in bearer bonds sitting in a metal box in an empty house. The first thing I needed was basic survival. I spent that first week getting the utilities turned back on, buying the bare minimum of furniture from IKEA, a mattress, a small couch, a table and chairs. I set up one bedroom for myself and left the other two empty. I tried not to think about how one of those rooms should have been for Lily, the other for Mason, how I'd planned to paint them and set up bunk beds and make this house feel like a home again. Every day, I called Janet to ask about the visitation schedule. Every day, she told me the same thing. Marcus was exercising his legal right to the 30-day adjustment period. There was nothing we could do but wait. He can't keep them from you forever, Janet said during one of these calls. The court ordered supervised visitation. He has to comply. But he can make it as difficult as possible, I said bitterly. Yes, Janet admitted. He can. I hung up and sat in my empty house and thought about Daniel's letter. About the FBI contacts he'd mentioned. About the evidence he'd collected. And about Marcus. That night, I went back down to the hidden room. I'd been avoiding it, unnerved by its existence and what it represented. But I needed answers, and I had a feeling some of them might be in those files Daniel had left. I spent hours going through the documents. Most of it was related to Daniel's uncle's criminal organization, names I didn't recognize, crimes I couldn't fully understand. Wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering. The kind of white-collar crime that happens in boardrooms and bank accounts, far removed from the violent mob stories you see in movies. But buried in one of the folders, I found something that made my blood run cold. A photograph, maybe 15 years old based on the clothing and quality. It showed Daniel, younger, baby-faced, but definitely Daniel, standing with a group of men in military uniforms. They were all smiling, arms around each other's shoulders, clearly good friends. And standing right next to Daniel, grinning at the camera, was Marcus. I stared at that photograph for a long time, my mind racing. So Daniel and Marcus had served together, that much of the letter was true. But what were the odds that I would randomly meet Marcus at a grief support group 2 years after Daniel's death? That we would fall in love and marry? Had it been random? Or had Marcus sought me out deliberately? And if he'd sought me out deliberately, why? For the evidence Daniel had collected? For the money? Or for some other reason I couldn't yet see? I needed more information. I needed to understand who Marcus really was and what connection he'd had to Daniel beyond just being old army buddies. The next morning, I did something I'd been avoiding. I cashed in some of the bearer bonds. Just $10,000 worth, enough to give me some breathing room without depleting my resources too much. The process was easier than I'd expected. Bearer bonds are designed to be anonymous and easily liquidated. I walked out of the bank with a cashier's check and a strange feeling that I'd crossed some kind of line. With money in my account, I hired a private investigator. His name was Carl Patterson, and he came recommended by a woman I'd found through an online forum for divorced mothers. Carl was in his 50s, gruff and no-nonsense, with the kind of face that had seen too much to be shocked by anything. I met him at a coffee shop in downtown Cleveland. I showed him the photograph of Daniel and Marcus, and I told him what I wanted to know, everything about Marcus Foster. His background, his finances, his military service, any connection he'd had to Daniel Kowalski. I used Daniel's real name deliberately, watching Carl's face for recognition. He raised an eyebrow. Kowalski. That name came up in a federal case about 10-15 years back. Racketeering in Chicago. Daniel was the primary witness, I said. He was my first husband. Carl whistled low. And now you're telling me your second husband knew him? That's not a coincidence, Mrs. Foster. Call me Emma, I said. And no, I don't think it is. Carl took the case. I paid him a $5,000 retainer in cash, and he promised to have preliminary information within a week. While I waited, I tried to piece together my own memories. How had I met Marcus, exactly? The grief support group met at a community center in Beechwood, a Cleveland suburb. I'd gone every Tuesday evening for months after Daniel died. Marcus had shown up one night, 6 or 7 sessions in. He'd been quiet at first, just listening. Then he'd started participating, sharing stories about his father who'd died of cancer. We'd started talking after the sessions. Coffee, at first. Then dinner. He'd been so easy to talk to, so understanding of my grief. He'd never pushed, never rushed me. When I'd finally been ready to date again, it had felt natural to say yes to Marcus. Had I mentioned Daniel's death in that support group? Had I said his name? I couldn't remember. We'd all been encouraged to share our stories, to speak our loved ones' names as part of the healing process. I must have mentioned Daniel. Marcus must have known who I was before he ever spoke to me. He'd played me. From the very beginning, he'd known exactly who I was, and he'd played me like an instrument. But why? That was the question I couldn't answer. What did Marcus want from me? Have you ever realized that your entire life was built on lies? That the people you trusted most were playing roles, manipulating you towards some end you couldn't see? If you have, you know how I felt. And if this story is making you think about your own relationships, your own trust, hit that like button. Share this video. Check the description for more stories like this, because sometimes we need to hear these stories to recognize what's happening in our own lives. The days crawled by. I existed in a strange limbo, living in my dead husband's house, surrounded by furniture I'd bought with money he'd left me, waiting for permission to see my own children. I set up the third bedroom as an office and started looking for jobs online, just to have something to do. But every application felt pointless. Who was going to hire a 43-year-old woman with a 15-year gap in her work history? Marcus had taken everything from me, including my ability to envision a future. 11 days after the court hearing, Carl called me. "We need to meet," he said. "Not the coffee shop. Somewhere private. Can I come to your place?" My heart jumped. "You found something." "I found a lot of things," Carl said grimly. "You're going to want to sit down for this." He arrived an hour later, carrying a thick manila folder. I made coffee, more for something to do with my hands than because I wanted it, and we sat at my IKEA table, the late afternoon sun slanting through the windows. Carl opened the folder and pulled out a stack of documents. "Let's start with the basics. Marcus Foster, age 46, born in Akron, Ohio. Served in the Army from 1997 to 2005, honorable discharge. Married in 2006 to Rebecca Sullivan, divorced in 2010. 2 children from that marriage, Lily Foster, now 14, and Mason Foster, now 11. Wait. 2 children from a previous marriage. Not our children. My children, but from his previous marriage? But that couldn't be right. I'd given birth to Lily. I remembered the pregnancy, the delivery, the tiny weight of her in my arms. I remembered being pregnant with Mason, remembered the complications, the C-section, everything. Didn't I? Emma. Carl was looking at me with concern. "You okay? You went real pale there." "I'm fine," I managed. That's not right. Lily and Mason are my children. I gave birth to them." Carl shook his head slowly. "No, Emma. They're Marcus's kids from his first marriage. According to the court records from his first divorce, Rebecca Sullivan got primary custody initially, but then in 2014, she died in a car accident. Marcus got full custody at that point. 2014. The year before I'd married Marcus. The year before my whole life had supposedly begun with him. "No," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. "That's not. I remember being pregnant. I remember." But did I? When I tried to pull up specific memories, the hospital, the doctors, the delivery room, they felt fuzzy, uncertain. Like trying to remember a dream. The memories were there, but they didn't have the solid weight of reality. "Emma," Carl said gently, "I've got the birth certificates right here. Mother's name on both, Rebecca Sullivan. Later amended to Rebecca Foster after the marriage." He slid the documents across the table. I stared at them, at the names printed in official black ink. Rebecca Sullivan Foster. Mother. Not Emma. Rebecca. "I don't understand," I whispered. "I raised them. I was their mother. I am their mother." "You were their stepmother," Carl corrected softly. "Which, legally speaking, gave you no rights when the marriage ended. Marcus had sole biological and legal custody. The court had no grounds to give you visitation if he didn't want it." The room was spinning. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to anchor myself. How could I have forgotten this? How could I have misremembered something so fundamental? But even as I asked myself that question, I knew the answer. Trauma. Grief. The mind protecting itself by rewriting history into something more bearable. I'd loved Lily and Mason so completely, so fully, that at some point I'd started believing they were really mine. That I'd carried them, birthed them, created them. And Marcus had let me believe it. Had encouraged it, even. I remembered him saying things like, "You're such a natural mother, and they couldn't love you more if you'd given birth to them yourself." I'd thought he was being sweet. Now I realized he'd been manipulating me, reinforcing a delusion that would make me easier to control, and easier to destroy when the time came. "There's more," Carl said. He pulled out another document. "Marcus's financials. The mansion you lived in? Purchased in 2008, before his first marriage, with money from a family trust. So the court was right about that. It was never marital property. But here's what's interesting. Marcus is deep in debt." I looked up sharply. "What?" "The trust that bought the house has been dissolved. He's been taking out loans against the property for years. According to what I could dig up, his leverage to about $9 million on an $11 million property. Adding credit card debt, car loans, some bad investments, the man is underwater financially. But he always said, we had money. He said we were comfortable." "You were living on borrowed money and borrowed time," Carl said. "My guess. He needed a way out. A divorce where he kept the house, kept the kids, and stuck you with nothing while he figured out how to liquidate and disappear." I sat back, my mind reeling. Marcus hadn't destroyed me because he was cruel. He destroyed me because he was desperate. I'd been married to a man who was drowning financially, and instead of telling me, instead of asking for help, he decided to use me as a lifeboat and then throw me overboard once he'd reached shore. "What about his connection to Daniel?" I asked. "Did you find anything?" Carl's expression darkened. "This is where it gets really interesting. Marcus Foster and Daniel Kowalski did serve together, that part's true. Same unit, stationed in Germany in the early 2000s. They were close, from what I can tell. Brothers-in-arms type of situation." "But," I prompted, because I could hear the unspoken word hanging in the air. "But in 2004, there was an incident. Daniel reported Marcus for stealing from the unit's emergency fund. Nothing huge, a few $1,000s, but enough to trigger an investigation. Marcus was reprimanded but not court-martialed. He resented Daniel for it, though. There are letters in his military file, complaints he filed about Daniel, accusations that Daniel had fabricated the whole thing out of jealousy." "So they weren't friends," I said slowly. "They were enemies." "Exactly. And then, 2 years later, Daniel testifies against his uncle and goes into witness protection. Changes his name, moves to Cleveland, starts a new life. 10 years after that, Daniel dies suddenly of a heart attack. And less than 2 years after that, Marcus shows up in Cleveland and just happens to meet Daniel's widow at a grief support group. The pieces were clicking into place now, forming a picture that made my stomach turn. Marcus knew who I was. He sought me out deliberately." "That's my assessment," Carl agreed. "The question is why. What did he want from you?" I thought about the hidden room, the safe, the evidence Daniel had collected. "I think I know," I said quietly. I told Carl about the room, about Daniel's letter, about the files documenting his uncle's criminal organization. I didn't mention the bearer bonds. Some instinct told me to keep that to myself for now. Carl leaned back in his chair, processing. "So Marcus married you to get access to evidence that could incriminate a criminal organization. Evidence that Daniel had collected as insurance." "But I didn't know about it," I protested. "I didn't even know the room existed until a week ago." "Marcus didn't know that," Carl pointed out. "He probably assumed Daniel had told you. That you knew where the evidence was. He married you, searched for it, and when he couldn't find it, he decided to cut his losses," I finished. "Take what he could from the divorce and move on." "Or," Carl said slowly, he's still looking. "Emma, if this evidence is as damaging as you say it is, and if Marcus has connections to the organization it incriminates, he's not going to just walk away. He's going to keep digging. And eventually, he might dig in the right place." A chill ran down my spine. I'd been thinking of Marcus as just a cruel ex-husband. But if he was connected to organized crime, if he was looking for evidence that could send people to prison, what should I do? I asked. First, you need to secure that evidence, Carl said. Copy everything. Store the copies somewhere safe, somewhere Marcus could never access. Then you need to decide what you want to do with it. You could turn it over to the FBI, like Daniel suggested. Or, I prompted. Carl met my eyes. Or you could use it as leverage. Marcus took your life apart, Emma. If you've got evidence that could destroy him, that's power. That's a weapon. I thought about Marcus's laugh in the courtroom. About Lily and Mason, who I'd raised and loved and who probably thought I'd abandoned them. About the mansion I'd lived in for 15 years, believing it was my home. About the $48,000 the court had given me, like a tip for services rendered. I want my kids back, I said. I want to see them. Talk to them. Make sure they're okay. That's going to be hard, Carl warned. Marcus has full legal custody. You've got supervised visitation once a month, and even that hasn't started yet. Courts don't like to disrupt custody arrangements once they're established. Then help me find another way, I said. There has to be something. Some angle we're not seeing. Carl studied me for a long moment. You're not the same woman who walked into that coffee shop last week, are you? No, I said. And it was true. Something had hardened inside me, crystallized in the aftermath of all these revelations. I wasn't just Marcus's victim anymore. I wasn't just a woman who'd lost everything. I was someone with secrets, with resources, with knowledge that people would kill to protect. I was dangerous. I just hadn't figured out how to use that danger yet. Carl tapped the folder. I'll keep digging. See what else I can find on Marcus, on his finances, on any connections to organized crime. But Emma, I need you to promise me something. What? Be careful. If Marcus is who I think he is, if he's connected to the people Daniel testified against, he's not going to take kindly to you poking around in his business. Men like that, they're used to removing obstacles. Are you trying to scare me? I asked. I'm trying to keep you alive, Carl said bluntly. After he left, I sat at my table for a long time, watching the sun set through my bare windows. I thought about Daniel, who'd lived with secrets for our entire marriage. I thought about Marcus, who'd built our relationship on lies and manipulation. I thought about Lily and Mason, who were living in that mansion right now, probably confused and hurt, wondering why their mother had disappeared. I couldn't get to them through legal means. Marcus had made sure of that. But there were other ways. Indirect ways. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Marcus's company, he ran some kind of consulting firm. I'd never paid much attention to the details. His social media, though he kept it locked down. His associates, his friends, anyone he did business with. And then I found it, a charity event next month. A gala for the Cleveland Children's Hospital. Marcus was listed as a sponsor, which meant he'd be there. And it was open to the public if you bought a ticket. $500 per ticket. I could afford that now, with the bearer bonds. I could buy a ticket, get dressed up, walk into that gala like I belonged there. I could watch Marcus from across the room. Maybe I'd even find a way to talk to him. The idea was reckless, probably stupid. But I was tired of sitting in this empty house, waiting for permission to see my children. I was tired of being the victim in this story. If Marcus wanted to play games, I'd show him I could play too. And unlike him, I had nothing left to lose, which made me infinitely more dangerous. I clicked the button to purchase a ticket to the gala. The confirmation email arrived immediately. November 18th. 3 weeks away. I had 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to become someone who could walk into Marcus Foster's world and not just survive, but strike back. The war between us wasn't over. It was just beginning. The supervised visitation finally happened on day 31. I drove to the Family Services building in downtown Cleveland with my stomach in knots, arriving 15 minutes early because I couldn't bear to waste a single second of the hour I'd been granted. The visitation room was depressing. Fluorescent lights, plastic chairs, a table with a puzzle half finished on it, and a shelf of battered toys that looked like they'd been donated from someone's garage sale. A social worker named Patricia sat in the corner with a clipboard, there to observe and document everything. When Lily and Mason walked in, I almost didn't recognize them. It had only been a month, but something about them had changed. Lily looked older, her face harder. Mason wouldn't meet my eyes. "Hi, babies," I said, my voice breaking. I wanted to run to them, to pull them into my arms, but Patricia had been very clear about the rules. No physical contact unless the children initiated it. No discussion of the divorce or custody arrangement. No negative talk about their father. Essentially, I could sit in this depressing room with my children and pretend everything was fine while a stranger took notes on a clipboard. "Hi, Mom," Lily said quietly. She sat down at the table but didn't move closer. Mason followed her lead, sitting as far from me as the small table allowed. "How are you?" I asked, which was an absurd question given the circumstances, but what else could I say? "How's school? How are your friends?" "Fine," Lily said. "Good," Mason mumbled. They were so closed off, so guarded. What had Marcus told them? What lies had he fed them about why I wasn't there anymore? I spent the next 55 minutes trying desperately to connect with them, to break through whatever walls they'd built. I asked about Mason's soccer team. He gave one-word answers. I asked about Lily's art class. She shrugged. Every question hit a wall. Every attempt at conversation died in the stale air of that terrible room. When Patricia announced that time was up, Mason practically ran for the door. Lily lingered for just a moment, and I saw something in her eyes. Pain, confusion, maybe anger. But then it was gone, and she was following her brother out, and I was left alone in that room with Patricia and her clipboard. "That was rough," Patricia said, not unkindly. "First visits often are. They're adjusting to a lot of changes." "When can I see them again?" I asked. "We'll schedule another visit in 30 days, Patricia said. "Unless the court modifies the arrangement." 30 days. 1 hour with my children every 30 days, while Marcus had them the other 729 hours. It was impossible. Unbearable. I drove home crying so hard I had to pull over twice. By the time I got back to the Lakewood house, I was exhausted and empty, wrung out like a dish rag. But I was also more determined than ever. Whatever it took, whatever I had to do, I was going to get my children back. My children. Because even if I hadn't given birth to them, even if I had no legal rights to them, they were mine in every way that mattered. The gala was now 2 weeks away. I threw myself into preparation like it was a military operation. I bought a dress, nothing too flashy, just elegant enough to blend in with Cleveland's social elite. I got my hair done for the first time in months. I practiced walking in heels, talking confidently, being someone other than the broken woman I'd become. Carl called 3 days before the gala with an update. "I found something interesting," he said. "Marcus's consulting company. It's basically a shell. No real clients, no substantial revenue. But money moves through it constantly, in and out, in and out. My guy who specializes in financial fraud says it looks like money laundering." "Whose money?" I asked. "That's the question. Could be his own debt he's trying to hide from creditors. Could be his washing money for someone else. Either way, it's illegal as hell. If the IRS or FBI looked at his books, he'd be in serious trouble." "Could we make that happen?" I asked. "Could we report him?" "We could," Carl said slowly. "But here's the thing, if you report him and it goes sideways, if they can't make charges stick or if he gets tipped off somehow, he'll know you're coming after him. And men like Marcus, when they feel cornered, they get dangerous. If you're watching this and wondering whether I should have backed off, whether I should have just walked away and tried to rebuild my life somewhere else, leave a comment. Tell me what you would have done. Because I was at a crossroads, and I chose the dangerous path. I chose revenge. And you need to hear the rest to understand why. Hit that subscribe button and check the description for more stories like this, because this is where everything changed. The night of the gala, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom and barely recognized myself. The dress was black, simple but expensive. I'd splurged using more of the bearer bonds. My hair was styled in waves, my makeup carefully applied. I looked sophisticated, polished. I looked like someone who belonged at an $11 million mansion, not like someone living in a modest house in Lakewood, sleeping on an IKEA mattress. I looked like Emma Foster, Marcus's wife. Except I wasn't that person anymore. I didn't know who I was now. The gala was held at the Renaissance Hotel downtown. I arrived in my Honda Civic, which looked ridiculous amid the Teslas and BMWs in the parking garage, but I didn't care. I walked in through the main entrance, gave my name to the woman at the registration table, and received a name tag and a drink ticket. The ballroom was beautiful. Chandeliers, white tablecloths, a string quartet playing soft music in the corner. People in expensive clothes stood in clusters, drinking wine and talking in the animated way that wealthy people talk at charity events, where everyone pretends to care deeply about the cause but really they're just networking. I spotted Marcus almost immediately. He was standing near the bar with a group of men in suits, laughing at something someone had said. He looked good. He always looked good. Tall, fit, with that easy confidence that came from never having to question whether he belonged somewhere. I felt a rush of hatred so intense it almost knocked me over. This man had taken everything from me. And here he was, drinking wine and laughing at a charity gala, playing the role of the successful businessman, the devoted father, the pillar of the community. I wanted to walk over and throw my drink in his face. I wanted to scream at him in front of all these people, tell them what he'd done. But that would accomplish nothing except getting me thrown out, and possibly arrested. So instead, I did what I'd come here to do. I observed. I watched. I listened. Marcus moved through the room like a politician, shaking hands, slapping backs, charming everyone he talked to. But I noticed something. Every so often, he'd check his phone. And twice during the evening, he stepped out into the hallway to take calls, returning with a tense expression that he quickly masked. I also noticed the woman he kept talking to. She was younger than me, maybe early 30s, with blonde hair and a designer dress. Every time Marcus circled back to her, they'd talk in low voices, their heads close together. At one point, he touched her lower back, a gesture that was just barely appropriate for a professional event, but that I recognized instantly as intimate. Of course, there was another woman. It made perfect sense. Marcus had never been alone, he'd just upgraded, the way you upgrade a phone or a car. Trade in the old model for something newer and shinier. I felt a stab of something that might have been jealousy but was mostly just disgust. How long had this been going on? Had she been in the picture before the divorce, or had Marcus moved on with impressive speed afterward? I was so focused on watching them that I didn't notice the man approaching me until he was right beside me. "You look like you could use another drink," he said. I turned, startled. He was about my age, maybe a few years older, with graying hair and a kind face. There was something vaguely familiar about him, but I couldn't place it. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "No, you're not," he said gently. "You're standing here staring at Marcus Foster like you're planning his murder. Which, given that you're his ex-wife, makes a certain amount of sense." I stiffened. "How do you?" "Anthony Reed," he said, extending his hand. "I was Marcus's business partner until about 6 months ago. We had a falling out. I recognized you from the pictures in his office back when we were still partners." I shook his hand cautiously. "Emma." "I know," Anthony said. "Look, I don't mean to intrude. But I saw you come in, and I saw you watching Marcus, and I thought maybe we could help each other." "Help each other how?" I asked. Anthony glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Not here. Can we meet sometime this week? For coffee. I've got information about Marcus that I think you'd find very interesting." "What kind of information?" "The kind that could bury him," Anthony said simply. If you're interested. I studied his face, trying to read his intentions. Was this a trap? Was he working with Marcus somehow, trying to figure out what I knew? Or was he genuine, another person Marcus had hurt, looking for an ally in revenge? Why would you want to help me? I asked. Because Marcus screwed me over, Anthony said bluntly. Cost me a lot of money and nearly destroyed my reputation. I've been looking for a way to get back at him for months. And then I see you here, looking at him like that, and I think, maybe she wants the same thing I do. It was reckless to trust him. I knew that. But I was running out of options, and if Anthony really did have information that could hurt Marcus. Coffee sounds good, I said. Where and when? We exchanged phone numbers. Anthony melted back into the crowd, and I stayed a little longer, watching Marcus and his new girlfriend, memorizing faces and names when I could catch them. As I was leaving, walking through the hotel lobby toward the parking garage, I heard a voice behind me. Emma. I froze. Turned around slowly. Marcus was standing there, 10 feet away, his expression unreadable. What are you doing here? He asked. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. It's a charity event. I bought a ticket. I'm allowed to be here. You need to stay away from me, Marcus said quietly. From me, from my life, from my family. The court has rules about this, Emma. You're not supposed to contact me except through lawyers. I didn't contact you, I said. I came to a charity event. You're the one who followed me out here. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or frustration. What are you planning? I'm not planning anything, I lied. I'm just trying to survive the life you left me with. You got what you deserved, Marcus said coldly. You were always too needy, too clingy. The kids will be better off without you confusing them. The words hit like slaps. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him exactly what I thought of him and his lies and his cruelty. But instead, I smiled. You're probably right, I said sweetly. After all, you always know best, don't you, Marcus? You're so smart. So clever. I'm sure everything will work out exactly the way you've planned. I turned and walked away before he could respond, my heels clicking on the marble floor, my heart racing so fast I thought it might explode. I'd poked the bear. Shown him I wasn't broken. And now he'd be watching me, wondering what I knew, what I was planning. Good. Let him wonder. Let him lose sleep over it. Because I was done being his victim. I was becoming something else now. Something he should have thought twice about creating. I met Anthony Reed 3 days later at a quiet coffee shop in Shaker Heights. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. I ordered you a latte, he said as I sat down. Hope that's okay. It's fine, I said, though I had no intention of drinking anything until I understood what this meeting was really about. You said you had information about Marcus. Right to business, Anthony said with a slight smile. I can appreciate that. Okay. Here's the situation. Marcus and I were business partners for 3 years. His consulting firm, which isn't really a consulting firm at all, was supposed to be a 50-50 partnership. I brought the clients, he handled the operations. Operations meaning money laundering? I asked. Anthony's eyebrows rose. You know about that? I've had him investigated, I admitted. My PI says the company's financial activity looks like laundering. Your PI is right, Anthony said. But it's worse than that. Marcus isn't just washing money, he's stealing from the people he's washing it for. Skimming off the top, hiding it in offshore accounts, cooking the books to cover his tracks. I leaned forward. Who is he washing money for? Anthony hesitated. That's where it gets dangerous. Ever hear of the Kowalski organization out of Chicago? The name hit me like ice water. Daniel's uncle, I said before I could stop myself. Daniel. Anthony looked confused. I realized my mistake immediately. I'd revealed information I shouldn't have. But it was too late to take it back now. My first husband, Daniel Kowalski. He testified against his uncle's organization and went into witness protection. Anthony sat back, his expression shifting as he processed this. Holy shit. So Marcus married you because he thought I had access to evidence Daniel collected, I finished. Evidence that could destroy the organization. Do you? Anthony asked. Have the evidence? I studied him carefully. Could I trust him? Everything in me screamed to be careful, to keep my cards close to my chest. But I needed allies. I needed help. And if Anthony really was Marcus's enemy? Yes, I said finally. I found it after the divorce. Daniel left it hidden in our old house. Anthony let out a low whistle. That's why Marcus went nuclear on you in the divorce. He didn't find what he was looking for, so he decided to punish you and move on. That's my theory, I said. But if he's still working for the organization, if he's laundering their money, then he hasn't really moved on. He's still connected to them. More than connected, Anthony said grimly. He's in deep with them. After Daniel's testimony put his uncle away, the organization restructured. Now it's run by a guy named Sergei Volkov. Russian, brutal, smart. Marcus has been washing Volkov's money for at least 5 years, probably longer. And you were part of this? I asked. Not knowingly, Anthony said quickly. I thought we were running a legitimate consulting business. I didn't know what was really going on until about 8 months ago, when I started noticing discrepancies in our accounts. When I confronted Marcus, he tried to buy my silence. Offered me a bigger cut if I'd just looked the other way. But you didn't, I said. No, I didn't. So Marcus squeezed me out. Restructured the company, bought out my share for way less than it was worth, and made it clear that if I caused trouble, I'd end up like Daniel. I felt a chill. He said that. About Daniel. Not in those exact words. But the implication was clear. He said Daniel had been a problem that took care of itself, and I could either be smart or be another problem. So I took the buyout and kept my mouth shut. Until now. Why now? I asked. What changed? Anthony met my eyes. I found out Marcus is planning something big. Something that involves Volkov's organization and a lot of money. And I think when it's done, Marcus is going to disappear. Probably fake his death, leave the country, start over somewhere with a new identity. When? I asked. I don't know exactly. Soon, though. Within the next few months. And the kids? The question came out harsher than I'd intended. What happens to Lily and Mason when Marcus disappears? Anthony's expression softened. I don't know, Emma. But I don't think Marcus is going to take them with him. My guess? He'll make arrangements for them to go to relatives, or into the system, or… No, I said firmly. That's not happening. Those kids have already lost their biological mother. They're not losing another parent. Then we need to move fast, Anthony said. Because once Marcus executes whatever he's planning, he'll be gone. And if you want to get those kids back, if you want to make sure he faces consequences for what is done, we need to stop him before he disappears. I thought about the evidence in Daniel's safe. About the bearer bonds. About everything I'd learned over the past month. What did you have in mind? Anthony pulled a USB drive from his pocket and slid it across the table. I've been collecting evidence for months. Financial records showing the money laundering, communications between Marcus and people in Volkov's organization, documentation of the fraud. It's all here. But I can't use it alone. Marcus would know it came from me, and I'd end up dead. But if we work together, if we can get more evidence and bring in law enforcement simultaneously, we could bury him, I finished. We could bury him, Anthony agreed. But Emma, you need to understand what you're getting into. We're not just talking about taking down your ex-husband. We're talking about going up against organized crime. These are people who kill witnesses. People who've gotten away with murder and worse for decades. I picked up the USB drive, turning it over in my fingers. Every rational part of me said to walk away, to take what I had and run, to start over somewhere far away from Cleveland and Marcus and all of this. But I thought about Lily's closed-off face in the visitation room. About Mason refusing to look at me. About the way Marcus had laughed in the courtroom. "I'm in," I said. "Tell me what we need to do." Over the next hour, Anthony laid out a plan. It was risky, probably crazy, but it had a chance of working. We'd gather more evidence, build an airtight case, and then present it simultaneously to the FBI and to a journalist Anthony knew who specialized in organized crime reporting. The publicity would protect us from retaliation. If we disappeared or died after going public, it would be too obvious who was responsible. "There's one more thing," I said. "I have evidence from Daniel. Documentation of the original organization, testimony transcripts, names and dates going back 15 years. If we combine what you have with what I have, we'd have enough to take down the whole operation," Anthony said. "Not just Marcus, but Volkov and everyone else." "Is that a problem?" I asked. "It's dangerous," Anthony said. "But it might also be our best protection. If they know we have enough to destroy the entire organization, they can't kill us without triggering the release of all that information. It's mutually assured destruction. So we need a dead man switch," I said. "If something happens to us, the evidence goes public automatically." "Exactly," Anthony said. "Can you arrange that?" I thought about Carl, about how much I trusted him. "I think so." We agreed to meet again in a week with all our evidence combined. Anthony would work on getting more financial records, and I would compile Daniel's files and set up the dead man's switch. As I drove home, the USB drive felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. I'd just committed to going to war with organized crime. With people who'd killed witnesses before. People who'd probably killed Daniel. Had it been a heart attack that killed him? Or had they gotten to him first, made it look natural? The thought chilled me. But it also strengthened my resolve. If they'd killed Daniel, if they'd taken him from me and left me alone and vulnerable so that Marcus could swoop in and manipulate me, then they'd underestimated me. They'd thought I was just a grieving widow, easy prey. They were about to find out how wrong they were. When I got home, I went straight to the hidden room. I pulled out all of Daniel's files and started photographing every page with my phone, creating digital backups. It took hours. By the time I finished, it was past midnight and my eyes were burning from strain. But I had it. Everything. Daniel's testimony, the names, the dates, the financial transactions. 15 years of evidence documenting a criminal organization. Combined with Anthony's evidence of current money laundering and fraud, we had enough to destroy them all. The question was whether we'd survive long enough to use it. I called Carl the next morning and asked him to meet me. When he arrived, I showed him everything, the USB drive from Anthony, the digital copies of Daniel's files, the whole plan. Carl listened in silence, his expression growing grimmer by the minute. "This is insane," he said when I finished. "Emma, these people kill witnesses. They've been doing it for decades. You're talking about painting a target on your back." "They already killed Daniel," I said. "I'm sure of it now. And if I don't stop Marcus, he's going to disappear with my kids' custody and I'll never see them again. This is my only chance." "It's suicide," Carl said flatly. "So help me make it less suicidal," I countered. "Help me set up the dead man's switch. Help me figure out how to do this without getting killed." Carl rubbed his face with both hands. "You're not going to back down, are you?" "No," I said. "I'm not." "Then we do this smart," Carl said. "We don't just set up one dead man's switch, we set up three. 3 different people, 3 different sets of evidence, all programmed to go public if they don't hear from you regularly. We also set up a safety deposit box with a major bank, with instructions that if you die or disappear, the contents get mailed to multiple law enforcement agencies and media outlets. Can you arrange all that? I asked. I can, Carl said. But Emma, once we flip this switch, there's no going back. You'll be in danger until these people are arrested. Maybe even after, if anyone on the outside wants revenge. Are you sure you want to do this? I thought about Lily and Mason. About the life Marcus had stolen from me. About Daniel, who tried to protect me even from beyond the grave. I'm sure, I said. For everyone watching who thinks I was making a mistake, who thinks I should have just walked away, I need you to understand, sometimes there is no walking away. Sometimes the only path forward is through the fire. If you've ever had to make an impossible choice, if you've ever had to risk everything for the people you love, you know what I mean. Drop a comment. And check the description box for more stories like this, stories about people who refused to stay victims. Over the next week, Carl and I set up the infrastructure for our protection. 3 trusted contacts, each with complete sets of evidence, each with instructions to release everything if they didn't hear from me weekly. A safety deposit box with physical copies and a letter to be opened if I died. And backups stored with a lawyer in another state, someone I'd never met and who had no connection to Marcus or Cleveland. It was paranoid and elaborate. It was also the only thing that might keep me alive. Anthony and I met again to combine our evidence and coordinate our approach to the FBI. We decided to contact them on a Monday morning, 2 weeks away, giving us time to make sure everything was in order. But 3 days before we were supposed to contact the FBI, something happened that changed everything. I came home from a meeting with Carl to find my front door slightly ajar. I'd locked it. I was sure I'd locked it. My heart hammering, I pushed the door open slowly. The house was silent. Nothing looked disturbed in the living room. I crept through to the kitchen, looking for signs of a break-in. That's when I saw it. Sitting on my kitchen table, where I'd left my empty coffee cup that morning, was a single photograph. It was a picture of Lily and Mason, taken recently, maybe yesterday or the day before. They were at their school, walking toward the entrance, backpacks on their shoulders. The photo had been taken from across the street, zoomed in just enough to show their faces clearly. And written across the bottom in red marker were 4 words, "Stop or they are next." My hands started shaking so badly I dropped the photograph. It fluttered to the floor, and I stared at it, my vision tunneling, my breath coming in short gasps. They knew. Somehow, they knew what I was planning. And they were threatening my children. I grabbed my phone and called Carl with trembling fingers. He answered on the first ring. "Someone broke into my house," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "They left a picture of the kids. A threat." "Get out," Carl said immediately. "Right now, Emma. Get in your car and drive somewhere public. Don't tell me where, just go. I'll meet you in an hour at the place we talked about last week." The place we'd talked about last week was a police station in a neighboring suburb. We'd identified it as a safe meeting spot if things went wrong. I grabbed my purse and ran out of the house, not even bothering to lock the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove to the police station, parked in front where there were security cameras, and waited. Carl arrived 20 minutes later. We went inside and asked to speak to a detective. A tired-looking woman named Detective Sarah Morrison took us into an interview room. I told her everything. About the divorce, about Marcus's connection to organized crime, about the evidence Daniel had left, about the break-in and the threat. I showed her pictures of the photograph. I'd had the presence of mind to snap a few shots with my phone before leaving the house. Detective Morrison listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat back and studied me carefully. "This is a lot to process," she said finally. "You're alleging that your ex-husband is connected to the Volkov organization." "I don't know who that is," I lied instinctively, not wanting to reveal how much Anthony had told me. "Sergei Volkov," Morrison said. "Russian organized crime, operating primarily out of Chicago but with reach into Cleveland, Detroit, several other cities. We've been trying to build cases against him for years, but his slippery, insulated by layers of legitimate businesses and people who are too scared to testify. So you know about him, I said. Oh, we know about him, Morrison said grimly. What we don't have is evidence. If what you're saying is true, if you actually have documentation of his organization's activities. I do, I said. From my first husband, who testified against Volkov's predecessor, and from Marcus Foster's former business partner, who has evidence of current money laundering. Morrison leaned forward. I need to see this evidence. I'll show you, I said. But I need protection first. For me and for my children. They just threatened them. I can't. My voice broke. I can't let anything happen to them. Where are the children now? Morrison asked. With their father. With Marcus. Who's connected to the people who just threatened them. Morrison picked up her phone. I need to make some calls. Are you willing to stay here while I talk to some people? I nodded. I wasn't going anywhere. The police station was the safest place I could be. Morrison stepped out. Carl and I sat in that interview room for what felt like hours but was probably only 45 minutes. When Morrison came back, she had 2 men with her, both in suits, both with the kind of serious expressions that said federal agents. Emma Foster, this is Agent Chen and Agent Rodriguez from the FBI, Morrison said. They'd like to talk to you about Daniel Kowalski. So began the longest night of my life. I told the whole story again, this time to the FBI agents. I showed them everything I had, the digital copies of Daniel's files, the photograph of the threat, Anthony's USB drive. I told them about the dead man switches, about the safety deposit box, about everything Carl and I had set up. Agent Chen, a stern-looking man in his 50s, listened to it all with an expression that gave nothing away. When I finished, he exchanged a look with Agent Rodriguez, a younger woman with sharp eyes. We've been aware of Marcus Foster for several months, Chen said. He's been on our radar as a possible associate of the Volkov organization, but we haven't had enough evidence to move on him. What you're giving us, if it checks out, this could be the break we've been waiting for. What about the children? I asked. Lily and Mason. They're with Marcus right now. If he finds out I've talked to you, we'll send officers to collect them immediately, Rodriguez said. They'll be placed in protective custody until we can sort this out. I want to see them, I said. I want to make sure they are safe. That can be arranged, Rodriguez said. But Emma, you need to understand what's going to happen now. Once we move on this, once we start making arrests, your life is going to change dramatically. You'll likely need to enter witness protection, at least temporarily. You won't be able to contact friends, family, anyone from your old life. I don't have an old life anymore, I said bitterly. Marcus already destroyed that. Then let's make sure he pays for it, Chen said. They moved fast. Within 2 hours, police officers had gone to Marcus's mansion and collected Lily and Mason under the guise of a welfare check. Marcus had protested, threatened to call his lawyer, but there was nothing he could do. The children were taken into protective custody, and he was informed that he was not to leave the city while an investigation was pending. I wasn't allowed to see the kids yet. The FBI wanted to move on Marcus and the rest of the organization before anyone knew I was the source. They were afraid if word got out, someone might try to silence me before arrests could be made. So I spent 3 days in a safe house, guarded by federal agents, while Carl and Anthony and the FBI built their case. I stared at the walls. I paced. I barely slept. All I could think about was Lily and Mason, scared and confused, wondering why they'd been taken from their father, probably thinking this was somehow my fault. On the 4th day, Agent Rodriguez came to the safe house with news. We're moving tonight, she said. Simultaneous arrests in Cleveland, Chicago, Detroit, and Miami. 43 people total, including Marcus Foster and Sergei Volkov. It's the biggest operation we've run against this organization in 15 years. Will it stick? I asked. Will they stay in prison? With the evidence you and Anthony provided, combined with Daniel's original documentation? Yes. We've got them on racketeering, money laundering, fraud, conspiracy, and 3 murders we can directly link to them through the financial trails. They are not getting out. 3 murders, I said softly. Was Daniel one of them? Rodriguez hesitated, then nodded. We believe so. The heart attack was induced. Potassium injection, meant to look natural. We're exhuming his body to confirm, but the evidence strongly suggests he was murdered. I closed my eyes. I'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed was still a blow. Daniel had died trying to protect me. And I'd moved on, married his enemy, walked right into the trap they'd set for me. What about the kids? I asked. When can I see them? Tomorrow, Rodriguez said. After the arrests. We'll bring them to you here, let you explain everything to them before this hits the news. Because Emma, this is going to be huge. National news. You're going to be the woman who took down one of the most powerful organized crime syndicates in the Midwest. I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to see my children. The arrests happened that night at 11 p.m., coordinated across 4 cities. I watched the news coverage with Rodriguez and Chen, seeing footage of Marcus being led out of the mansion in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled, his expression shocked. He'd thought he was untouchable. He'd thought he'd gotten away with everything. He was wrong. By morning, all 43 suspects were in custody. The news was calling it Operation Clean Sweep, and reporters were breathlessly describing it as the biggest takedown of organized crime in recent memory. And at 10 a.m., they brought Lily and Mason to the safe house. Lily and Mason walked into the safe house escorted by a child services worker I hadn't met before. They looked exhausted, scared, and confused. When they saw me, Mason's face crumpled and he started to cry. Mom, he said, his voice small and broken. What's happening? Why did they take us away? Where's Dad? I dropped to my knees and opened my arms, and thank God, they ran to me. Both of them, even Lily who'd been so closed off at the last supervised visit. They crashed into me and I held them so tight I was probably hurting them, but I couldn't let go. It's okay, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. You're safe now. I've got you. I'm not going anywhere. They said Dad was arrested, Lily said against my shoulder. They said he did bad things. But that's not true, right? Dad wouldn't. Come sit down, I said gently, pulling back to look at them. I need to explain some things to you. It's going to be hard to hear, but I need you to know the truth. Agent Rodriguez had left the room to give us privacy. The child services worker, her name was Amanda, sat quietly in the corner, there to observe but not interfere. I took the kids to the couch and sat between them, holding both their hands. And then I told them everything. I started with the easy part, that I discovered Marcus had been doing illegal things involving money and criminals. That he'd been arrested because of it. I watched their faces as they processed this, saw the denial and confusion warring with the need to believe me. Then I told them the harder part. That Marcus had manipulated the divorce, had taken them away from me not because I was a bad mother but because he wanted to punish me and control the situation. That the supervised visitation, the restrictions, all of it had been part of his plan. But why? Mason asked, his voice breaking. Why would he do that to you? You were married. You loved each other. How do you explain adult cruelty to a child? How do you tell them that sometimes people use love as a weapon? Marcus married me for the wrong reasons, I said carefully. He was looking for something that belonged to my first husband, Daniel. Information that could hurt the people Marcus worked for. When he couldn't find it, he decided to get rid of me in a way that would hurt me the most. By taking us away, Lily said flatly. She was older, quicker to understand the implications. We were his weapon. You were never a weapon, I said firmly. You were always my children. My beautiful, wonderful children that I love more than anything in the world. What Marcus did had nothing to do with you and everything to do with his own cruelty. Lily's eyes were filling with tears. But we thought you didn't want us anymore. That you'd given up on us. Never, I said fiercely. I fought for you every single day. Every single day. I was trying to figure out how to get you back. And I would have kept fighting forever if that's what it took. Mason was crying openly now. I missed you so much. Every night I'd ask Dad when we could see you, and he'd just say you were busy or you didn't want to see us, and I knew he was lying but I didn't know how to. He broke down completely, sobbing. I pulled him close, and Lily too, and we sat there crying together. All the pain of the past months, all the confusion and fear and anger, it came pouring out. When we'd all calmed down a little, Lily asked the question I'd been dreading. What happens now? Where do we go? Can we go home? The mansion isn't our home anymore, I said gently. It never really was. It belonged to Marcus's family. But I have a house. The house where I lived with my first husband, Daniel. It's not as big or fancy, but it's ours. Fully ours. And I've been fixing it up, getting rooms ready for you. You were preparing for us? Lily asked. You knew you'd get us back. I hoped, I corrected. I prayed. I fought. And yes, I prepared. Because I never stopped believing that someday, somehow, you'd come home to me. Amanda, the child services worker, spoke up from the corner. The FBI has indicated that you three will need to stay in protective custody for at least a few more weeks while they wrap up the investigation and make sure there's no ongoing threat. But after that, Emma has been cleared to resume full custody of both children. Full custody. Lily said. Not supervised visits. Not supervised visits, I confirmed. Full custody. You'll live with me, and we'll be a family again. Mason threw his arms around me again. I want to go home with you. I don't care if the house is small. I just want to be with you. Me too, Lily said quietly. But Mom, there's something I need to tell you. Something about Dad, about Marcus. She glanced at Amanda nervously. I squeezed her hand. You can tell me anything. The last few weeks, Marcus has been really stressed, Lily said. He'd be on the phone at all hours, yelling at people in Russian sometimes. And he was making plans. I heard him talking to his girlfriend. So you knew about her, I said. Everyone knew about her, Lily said with a roll of her eyes. She's been coming around since like a month before the divorce was final. Her name's Katerina. She's from Russia too, I think. Anyway, I heard Marcus telling her that they needed to leave soon, that something big was happening and they needed to be gone before it did. Did he say where they were going? I asked. No, but... Lily hesitated. I found passports in his desk. New ones, with our pictures but different names. Yours too, actually. It was weird. My blood ran cold. Marcus had been planning to take the kids and run. Probably when his big operation, whatever it was, went down. And he'd been planning to use fake passports, fake identities, to do it. If the FBI hadn't moved when they did, if I hadn't found Daniel's evidence and come forward, Marcus would have disappeared with Lily and Mason. I would have never seen them again. Agent Rodriguez must have been listening from the next room, because she appeared in the doorway immediately. Lily, this is very important. These passports, do you remember what names were on them? Lily shook her head. I only looked for a second before Marcus came in. He was really mad that I'd been in his desk. But I think my name was something Russian. Anastasia, maybe. Rodriguez and I exchanged glances. This was valuable information, details that could help the FBI build their case even further. We spent the rest of the day together in the safe house. The kids asked questions, and I answered as honestly as I could without terrifying them. We ate pizza that the FBI agents ordered. We watched a movie. We started to feel like a family again, slowly, carefully, like healing a wound that hadn't quite closed. That night, after the kids had gone to bed in the safe house's spare rooms, I sat with Agent Rodriguez and Agent Chen and told them what Lily had said about the passports and Marcus's plans. He was going to run, Chen said, nodding. We suspected as much. There's a major weapons deal that was supposed to go down next week, guns being moved from Eastern Europe through Miami and up to Chicago. Marcus was the money man on it. Our guess is he was going to take his cut and disappear after the deal went through. How much money are we talking about? I asked. 15 million, Rodriguez said. Maybe more. Enough to live very comfortably in a non-extradition country for the rest of his life. $15 million. And I'd been awarded $48,000 in the divorce. The disparity would have been funny if it wasn't so enraging. What will happen to him? I asked. How long will he be in prison? If we can make all the charges stick, and we believe we can, he's looking at 25 to life, Chen said. The racketeering alone carries a 20-year sentence. Add in the fraud, the money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, he's not getting out. Good, I said. And I meant it. After everything Marcus had done, prison was the least he deserved. If you're watching this and you think I'm being too harsh, if you think I should have some compassion for the man I once loved, let me ask you this. What would you do to the person who tried to steal your children? Who threatened them to silence you? Who partnered with murderers and criminals and then had the audacity to call you an unfit parent? Leave me a comment. Tell me if I'm wrong. And make sure you check the description box below for more stories like this, because you need to hear how this ends. We stayed in the safe house for 2 more weeks while the FBI finished processing arrests and building their case. During that time, I started to help Lily and Mason process everything that had happened. We talked about Marcus, not as a monster, because he was still their father and they'd loved him, but as someone who'd made very bad choices. We talked about their biological mother, Rebecca, who they barely remembered. We talked about Daniel, who they'd never known but who'd saved us all with the evidence he'd left behind. And slowly, carefully, we started to heal. The media attention was intense. My picture was everywhere, the woman who brought down the Volkov crime syndicate. Reporters camped outside the safe house until federal marshals moved us to a different location. My phone, which I'd had to turn off, had hundreds of messages when I finally checked it. Some were supportive. Some were hateful, people who thought I'd betrayed my husband, or who didn't believe the charges, or who just enjoyed being cruel to women in the public eye. I deleted them all without reading most of them. I didn't care what strangers thought. I only cared about Lily and Mason, about getting them home and building a life together. Finally, after 16 days in protective custody, we were cleared to go home. The FBI provided security for the first week, just in case anyone from the organization who hadn't been arrested decided to retaliate, but after that, we were on our own. The Lakewood house had never looked so good to me. It was small, yes. It needed work, yes. But it was ours. I'd spent the months before the arrests fixing it up, and now I'd spent the 2 weeks in protective custody having contractors do more work. The kids' bedrooms were painted. There were beds and dressers and bookshelves. I'd hung pictures on the walls, bought warm blankets, made it feel like home. When we walked in, Mason ran straight upstairs to see his room. I heard him shout, "Mom, you painted it blue. My favorite color." Lily was more reserved, but I saw her smile when she saw her room. "It's nice," she said quietly. "Really nice." That first night in our house, our real house, I made dinner, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread, and we ate together at the table. Then we sat on the couch and watched TV, something mindless and funny. And when it was time for bed, both kids hugged me tight and told me they loved me. "I love you too," I said. "More than you'll ever know." After they'd gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room and finally let myself cry. But these weren't tears of grief or anger. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of overwhelming emotion that we'd made it through. We'd survived Marcus Foster. We'd survived the Volkov organization. We'd survived everything they'd thrown at us, and we'd come out on the other side together. I was so focused on that feeling that I almost didn't hear my phone buzz with a new text message. When I looked at the screen, my blood turned to ice. The message was from an unknown number, and all it said was, "Daniel says hello. We'll be seeing you soon." I stared at that message for a full minute, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then I called Agent Rodriguez. She answered on the second ring. "Emma, what's wrong?" "I just got a text message," I said, trying to keep my voice steady so I wouldn't wake the kids. "From an unknown number. It said, 'Daniel says hello. We'll be seeing you soon.'" There was a pause. "Forward it to me immediately. And Emma, I'm sending a protection detail to your house right now. Don't open the door for anyone except officers you can verify through me." "Do you think it's real?" I asked. "Or someone trying to scare me?" "I don't know," Rodriguez admitted. "But we're not taking chances. Pack bags for you and the kids. Enough for a few days. We might need to move you again." "We just got home," I said, and I hated how my voice broke. "The kids just got settled. I can't." "I know," Rodriguez said, and she sounded genuinely sympathetic. "I'm sorry. But your safety comes first. Pack the bags and wait for my call." I hung up and sat there in the dark living room, looking at that message. "Daniel says hello." What did that mean? Daniel was dead. I'd buried him 6 years ago. Unless. A crazy thought was forming in my mind. A thought so wild I didn't want to acknowledge it. But it wouldn't go away. What if Daniel wasn't dead? He'd faked his death before, in a sense, changed his identity, started over with a new name. What if he'd done it again? What if the heart attack had been staged, a way to disappear completely, to protect me from the people who were hunting him? But that didn't make sense. If Daniel were alive, why wouldn't he have contacted me? Why would he let me grieve, let me marry Marcus, let me go through hell without ever reaching out? Unless he couldn't. Unless reaching out to me would have put me in danger. My phone rang, making me jump. Rodriguez again. "Officers are 5 minutes away," she said. "But Emma, I need to tell you something. We've been going through the evidence you provided, and we found something in Daniel's files. Notes he'd written, dated about 2 weeks before his death." "What kind of notes?" I asked. "Plans," Rodriguez said. "Detailed plans for faking his death if he felt he was in immediate danger. He even had a contact, someone in the Marshal's service who owed him a favor, who could help him disappear completely." My hands started shaking. "Are you saying Daniel might be alive?" "I'm saying it's possible," Rodriguez said carefully. "We're looking into it. But Emma, if he is alive, if he's been alive this whole time and he's reaching out now." "Why now?" I interrupted. "Why wait 6 years? Why let me think he was dead?" "I don't know," Rodriguez admitted. "But we're going to find out. The protection detail is pulling up to your house now. Officers Brennan and Torres. I'm texting you their badge numbers. Confirm their identities before you let them in." The next hour was a blur. I checked the officers' credentials, let them inside, and then went upstairs to wake Lily and Mason. They were groggy and confused as I helped them pack bags, telling them we needed to go somewhere safe for a little while, that there might be a threat. "Is it because of Dad?" Lily asked. "Because of the trial?" "Maybe," I said. "We're just being careful." But as we drove away from the house in an unmarked car, officers in front and behind us, I kept thinking about that message. Daniel says hello. If Daniel was alive, if he'd been alive this whole time, what did that mean? What did he want? And why surface now, right after Marcus's arrest, right after everything had been exposed? They took us to a different safe house, this one outside of Cleveland in a small town I'd never heard of. It was a ranch-style house on a quiet street, nondescript and forgettable. The FBI had obviously used it before. There were locks on all the windows, cameras at every entrance, and a panic button in the master bedroom. By the time we arrived, it was nearly 2 a.m. The kids were exhausted, barely awake as I helped them to their beds. I tucked them in and then collapsed on the couch in the living room, too wired to sleep. Agent Rodriguez arrived at 6 a.m. with coffee and news. "We traced the phone number," she said. "It's a burner, bought with cash 3 days ago at a convenience store in Akron. We pulled security footage from the store." She opened her tablet and showed me a grainy video. A man in a baseball cap and sunglasses, face mostly hidden, buying a cheap phone. "Can you tell who it is?" I asked. "Not definitively," Rodriguez said. "But Emma, look at his build. His height. His mannerisms." I watched the video again, focusing on the way the man moved. There was something familiar about it, something that triggered a memory I couldn't quite place. And then he turned, just for a second, giving the camera a better angle on his profile. My coffee cup slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. "That's Daniel," I whispered. "That's my husband." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "We think so too. We're running facial recognition to confirm, but the preliminary analysis suggests it's him." "How?" I asked. "How is he alive? I saw his body. I went to his funeral. I buried him." "The body you buried was Daniel's," Rodriguez said. "We confirmed that with dental records when we exhumed him last week. But here's what we think happened. Daniel faked his death initially, had his contact in the Marshal Service help him, got a body from the morgue that was similar enough to pass with a closed casket. He went underground, completely disappeared." "But why?" I asked. "Why put me through that? Why let me think he was dead?" "Because the organization had found him," Rodriguez said. "And if he'd stayed alive, they would have killed him for real, and probably you too, to tie up loose ends. By dying, by making them think they'd won, he protected both of you." "For 6 years," I said bitterly. "He let me grieve for 6 years. Let me marry Marcus." I stopped, a horrible realization dawning. Did he know? Did he know Marcus would come after me? Rodriguez hesitated. "We found more notes in his files. He suspected Marcus would try to get close to you, yes. He thought Marcus was looking for the evidence on behalf of the organization. But Daniel had set it up so that the evidence was hidden, protected, impossible to find unless you knew exactly where to look. So he used me as bait," I said, my voice flat. "He let Marcus marry me, let Marcus destroy my life, all so he could what? Gather more evidence? Build a better case." "Emma, I don't think." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't defend him to me. He let me think he was dead. He let me marry a man who was working for the people who wanted to kill us. He let me have my life destroyed. And now that it's convenient, now that the organization is falling apart, he sends me a text message." I stood up, pacing the small living room, fury coursing through my veins. I'd thought Marcus was the villain of this story. But maybe there were 2 villains. Maybe Daniel had been manipulating me just as much as Marcus had, just in a different way. "Where is he?" I asked. "If you have footage of him buying a phone 3 days ago, he can't be far. Have you found him?" "Not yet," Rodriguez said. "But Emma, we need to consider that he might try to contact you again. And when he does, we need to be ready." "Ready for what?" I asked. "To bring him in," Rodriguez said. "To question him, to figure out what his endgame is. Because Emma, if Daniel Kowalski has been alive this whole time, if he's been watching and waiting and gathering evidence, he's been operating outside the law. He's technically a fugitive. He faked his death and disappeared while in witness protection. That's a federal crime. So even if he was trying to protect me, he's going to be arrested." I asked. "Possibly," Rodriguez said. "It depends on what he's been doing, what evidence he can provide, and whether the U.S. attorney decides to prosecute." I laughed, a bitter sound. "So everyone in my life is a criminal. Marcus is going to prison. Daniel might go to prison. And I'm what? Collateral damage." "You're a survivor," Rodriguez said firmly. "And a hero. Without you, we never would have taken down the Volkov organization. 43 people are in custody because of you, Emma. People who've hurt and killed and destroyed lives for decades. That matters. Does it? I asked. Because right now, sitting in another safe house, hiding my children from threats we can't even identify, it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like I'm still Marcus's victim. Still Daniel's pawn. Rodriguez didn't have an answer for that. She just sat with me in silence while I cried angry, frustrated tears. Over the next 2 days, there were no more messages from Daniel. No sightings, no contact. The FBI expanded their search, but it was like he'd vanished again. Lily and Mason were getting restless, confused about why we were in another safe house when they'd just been told we could go home. I tried to explain without terrifying them, but how do you tell your children that their dead stepfather might be alive and might be dangerous? On the 3rd day, I was in the kitchen making lunch when Officer Torres came in from the backyard, his expression alert. There's someone at the perimeter, he said quietly. Male, Caucasian, 40s. He's not approaching the house, just standing at the tree line. My heart lurched. Show me. Torres pulled up the camera feed on his tablet. There, at the edge of the woods about 50 yards from the house, stood a man in jeans and a dark jacket. He was looking directly at the camera. And even though he was far away, even though the image was grainy, I recognized him instantly. Daniel. He wants to talk, I said. That's why he's there. He wants me to come out. Absolutely not, Rodriguez said. She'd been alerted immediately and was on speakerphone. Emma, do not go outside. We're sending tactical teams to bring him in. He'll run, I said. The second he sees them coming, he'll disappear again. Just like he's been doing for 6 years. That's not your problem, Rodriguez said. Yes, it is, I countered. He's here because of me. He sent that message to me. He's not going to talk to anyone but me. There was a pause. If you go out there, you'll be wired. Full audio and video. And we'll have snipers on him the entire time. If he makes one wrong move. He won't, I said, though I had no idea if that was true. Let me talk to him. Let me find out what he wants. Then you can arrest him or let him go or whatever you need to do. It took another 10 minutes of negotiation, but finally Rodriguez agreed. They fitted me with a small camera clipped to my jacket and a microphone that looked like a pendant. Officers positioned themselves at windows with rifles. And then they let me walk out the back door. Daniel didn't move as I crossed the yard toward him. He just stood there, watching me approach, his hands visible at his sides. When I was about 10 feet away, I stopped. Hi, Emma, he said quietly. And oh God, that voice. I'd forgotten how his voice sounded, the exact timbre and cadence of it. Hearing it now, after 6 years of believing him dead, was surreal. Are you real? I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. Or am I hallucinating? I'm real, Daniel said. I'm so sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry for everything. Sorry. I repeated, and anger flared through me. You let me think you were dead. You let me grieve you. You let me marry Marcus Foster, who worked for the people trying to kill you, and you did nothing. How dare you say you're sorry? I know, Daniel said. I know it's not enough. But Emma, if I'd stayed dead, if I'd never contacted you, you would have been safe. You would have eventually moved on, built a new life. But then Marcus went after you in the divorce, and I realized. You realized what? I demanded. That maybe you should intervene? That maybe watching me lose my children and my home wasn't part of your grand plan? I couldn't intervene directly, Daniel said. If the organization knew I was alive, they'd come after both of us. But I could leave you tools. Information. The safe, the evidence. I found that on my own, I said. After Marcus had already destroyed me. Your great plan didn't protect me, Daniel. It ruined me. I know, he said again, and there were tears in his eyes. And that's why I'm here. Because it's over now. The organization is done. Volkov is in custody, Marcus is in custody, the whole network is falling apart. Which means we're safe. You're safe. The kids are safe. Don't you dare talk about the kids, I said. You don't get to act like you care about them. You've been hiding for 6 years while I raised them. While you raised them with a man who was actively trying to destroy you, Daniel interrupted. Emma, I've been watching. Not closely, I couldn't risk it, but I've been checking in. I knew when you married Marcus. I knew about Lily and Mason. And I wanted to stop it, I wanted to tell you the truth, but what? I cut him off. But your mission was more important. But gathering evidence mattered more than my life. No, Daniel said firmly. Because telling you would have gotten you killed. Emma, the organization had people watching you. After I died, they kept surveillance on you for 2 years, waiting to see if I'd left anything behind, if you'd make contact with anyone suspicious. If I'd reached out to you during that time, they would have known I was alive. They would have killed you to get to me. I felt cold. You're saying they were watching me? The whole time. Until Marcus married you, Daniel confirmed. Then they pulled back, because Marcus was their inside man. He was supposed to find the evidence and report back. When he couldn't find it, when the marriage started falling apart, that's when I knew I had to act. That's when I started leaving breadcrumbs for you. Breadcrumbs, I repeated bitterly. Is that what you call ruining my life? Breadcrumbs. I call it giving you the tools to fight back, Daniel said. The combination to the safe was your birthday. I knew you'd find it eventually, especially if you moved back to the house. And when you did, you'd have everything you needed. Money, evidence, FBI contacts. Everything to take them down. And what about you? I asked. What have you been doing for 6 years while I was living this nightmare? Daniel's jaw tightened. Building the case that finally brought them down. I've been working with federal prosecutors, providing testimony, gathering evidence. Everything that happened last week, the arrests, the takedown, that was 6 years of work coming together. You're saying you were working with the FBI this whole time? I asked. With a very small group within the FBI, Daniel clarified. People I trusted from my original witness protection case. It had to be completely secret. If anyone in the organization had gotten wind of it, they would have killed me, I finished. Yes, I understand. You've made that very clear. But Daniel, you let me marry your enemy. You let me have children with him. I stopped, correcting myself. You let me raise his children as my own. You let him take them away from me. How is any of that protecting me? I didn't know Marcus would go that far, Daniel said, and for the first time, his voice cracked. I thought he'd search for the evidence, fail to find it, and eventually give up and move on. I didn't think he'd marry you. I didn't think he'd. Emma, when I found out about the divorce, about what he did to you in court, I wanted to kill him. I almost blew my cover just to. But you didn't, I said flatly. You stayed hidden. You stayed dead. And you let me suffer. Yes, Daniel said simply. Because if I'd revealed myself, you would have died. And Lily and Mason would have died. Marcus would have made sure of it, to protect himself and the organization. So I waited. I gathered more evidence. I made sure that when we finally moved, when we finally arrested everyone, the case would be airtight. That they'd never get out. That you'd be safe forever, not just for a little while. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to hit him. But I also understood, in a horrible way, the logic of what he'd done. He'd chosen the long game. He'd sacrificed my happiness, and his own, to ensure my survival. It didn't make it right. But I understood it. Why are you here now? I asked. Why show yourself? The FBI wants to arrest you. You faked your death while in witness protection. That's a federal crime. I know, Daniel said. And I'm prepared to face the consequences. But Emma, I needed to see you first. I needed to explain. I needed you to know that everything I did, every lie I told, every moment I stayed away, it was all to keep you alive. You should have trusted me, I said, and tears were streaming down my face now. You should have told me the truth from the beginning. We could have faced this together. No, we couldn't have, Daniel said gently. Because you're not a good liar, Emma. You never were. If you'd known I was alive, it would have shown. Marcus would have seen it. The organization would have seen it. And they would have acted. He took a step closer, and I heard the click of a rifle safety being disengaged somewhere behind me. Daniel froze, then carefully raised his hands. I'm not a threat, he called out, presumably to the FBI agents watching. Then, to me, I just want you to know that I love you. I never stopped loving you. And if I could go back and do it differently, if I could find a way to have protected you without causing you so much pain, I would. But I can't. All I can do is tell you the truth now and hope that someday you might forgive me. Forgive you? I asked. Daniel, you let me think you were dead for 6 years. You let me marry a criminal. You let me lose my children. How do I forgive that? I don't know, Daniel said honestly. Maybe you don't. Maybe you can't. But Emma, those kids, Lily and Mason, you got them back. You're safe. The organization is destroyed. Everything I did, everything I sacrificed, it was for this moment. For you to be standing here, alive and free. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since approaching. He looked older. There were lines on his face that hadn't been there before, gray in his hair. 6 years of hiding, of watching from the shadows, of living with the weight of what he'd done. He'd paid a price too. Maybe not the same price I'd paid, but a price nonetheless. What happens now? I asked. Now I turn myself in, Daniel said. I'll cooperate with the prosecution, testify at the trials, help them put away everyone we couldn't get in the initial arrests. And then I'll accept whatever punishment the court decides I deserve. Will they let you into witness protection again? I asked. After the trials? I don't know, Daniel said. Maybe. Or maybe I'll go to prison for faking my death. Either way, Emma, I want you to know, you're free now. Free of me, free of Marcus, free of all of it. You can build whatever life you want. You can be whoever you want to be. You don't owe me anything. I stood there, torn between anger and grief and a strange sense of relief. This chapter was finally closing. All the secrets were revealed. All the lies were exposed. I don't forgive you, I said finally. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But Daniel, thank you. For the evidence. For the money. For everything you left me that helped me survive Marcus. You would have survived anyway, Daniel said with a sad smile. You're stronger than you know, Emma. You always were. Agent Rodriguez's voice crackled in my earpiece. Emma, we need you to step back. We're moving in. I took a step backward, then another. Daniel kept his hands raised as FBI agents emerged from the house and the woods, converging on him from all sides. Daniel Kowalski, Agent Chen said, appearing beside me with handcuffs. You're under arrest for fraud, falsifying federal documents, and violation of witness protection protocols. Daniel didn't resist as they cuffed him. He just looked at me one more time, his eyes full of everything he couldn't say. Then they led him away, and I stood there in the yard of a safe house, watching my dead husband disappear for the second time in my life. The media went absolutely insane when they found out Daniel was alive. Dead witness rises to take down crime empire was the headline on CNN. The ghost who brought down the mob, declared the New York Times. My phone exploded with interview requests, book deal offers, people wanting to option my story for movies or podcasts or documentary series. I ignored all of it. I had more important things to focus on, like explaining to Lily and Mason that their stepfather, the man they'd mourned 6 years ago, was actually alive and had been orchestrating our protection from the shadows the entire time. It didn't go well. "So everyone in our life is a liar?" Lily asked, her voice sharp with hurt. "Marcus lied, Daniel lied, you lied." "I never lied to you," I said firmly. "I didn't know Daniel was alive. I thought he was dead, just like you did." "But you knew about Marcus," Mason pointed out. "You knew he was bad, and you let us live with him." "I didn't let you," I interrupted, trying to keep my voice calm. "He took you from me, remember? The court gave him custody. I was fighting to get you back. By working with criminals." Lily shot back. "By helping the FBI arrest our dad." Our dad. Even after everything Marcus had done, even after they knew the truth about his crimes, he was still their father. And I was still the person who'd helped put him in prison. This was going to be so much harder than I'd thought. We spent the next month in therapy, all 3 of us together, and each of us individually. Dr. Sarah Chen, our family therapist, helped us navigate the complicated mess of emotions we were all drowning in. Anger, betrayal, grief for lives that had never been real, fear about what came next. Slowly, painfully, we started to heal. Lily and Mason went back to school, though I transferred them to a different district so they wouldn't have to face their old classmates who'd seen the news. They made new friends gradually. They had bad days where they didn't want to talk to anyone, and better days where they seemed almost like normal kids again. I started looking for work. With the media attention, it was actually easier than I'd expected. Several companies reached out offering positions, probably hoping to capitalize on my notoriety. But I found something better, a job with a non-profit that helped women escaping domestic violence. The pay wasn't great, but the work mattered. I understood what these women were going through in a way most people couldn't. Carl, my private investigator, became a good friend. He stopped by regularly to check on us, and I learned he was divorced with 2 grown kids of his own. We started having coffee together, talking about life and survival and how to rebuild when everything falls apart. Anthony, Marcus's former business partner, also stayed in touch. He testified at the trials, helping secure convictions for Marcus and 17 other members of the Volkov organization. When it was over, he left Cleveland and moved to Seattle to start fresh. But he called sometimes, and would talk about everything that had happened, trying to make sense of it all. The trials took 8 months. I had to testify 3 times, once at Marcus's trial, once at Sergei Volkov's, and once at a conspiracy trial involving various lower-level members of the organization. Each time, I had to face Marcus across a courtroom, watch him try to intimidate me with his stares, listen to his lawyers try to discredit me on the stand. But I didn't break. I told the truth, calmly and clearly, and I watched the jury believe me. Marcus was convicted on all counts. He got 35 years in federal prison. He'll be 71 when he gets out, if he lives that long. The judge was particularly harsh because of the child custody manipulation, the fact that he'd used Lily and Mason as weapons against me. Volkov got life without parole. The head of the organization, finally brought down after decades of operating with impunity. And Daniel? His case was more complicated. The U.S. attorney initially wanted to prosecute him for faking his death and violating witness protection protocols. But his cooperation had been instrumental in taking down the organization. He provided evidence that led to 43 arrests and helped secure convictions in 39 cases. The prosecution, the defense, and the judge went back and forth for months about what to do with him. In the end, they offered him a deal: time served for the period he'd been in hiding, 3 years of supervised probation, and mandatory cooperation with any ongoing investigations into organized crime. No prison time, but he'd be under federal supervision and restrictions for years. Daniel took the deal. I didn't attend his sentencing. I couldn't. I was still too angry, too hurt, too confused about what I felt toward him. He'd saved my life, but he'd also destroyed it in so many ways. How do you reconcile that? But 6 months after his sentencing, he called me. The FBI had given him permission to make contact, and he wanted to know if I'd be willing to talk. I said yes. We met at a coffee shop in Cleveland, neutral territory. He looked better than he had at the safe house, healthier, less haunted. He'd shaved and gotten a haircut. He looked like the Daniel I'd married, before everything went wrong. "How are you?" he asked when we sat down. "Surviving," I said. "The kids are doing better. We're in therapy. We're learning how to be a family again." "That's good," Daniel said. "I'm glad." "Emma, I know you don't want to hear this, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what you went through. If I could have done it differently." "But you couldn't," I finished. "I know. You've said that. And Daniel, I do understand, intellectually, why you did what you did. But understanding doesn't make it hurt less." "I know," he said quietly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it. I just wanted to see you, to make sure you're okay." We talked for an hour. Not about the past, mostly, that was too painful. But about the future. Daniel was working with the FBI as a consultant, helping them understand organized crime networks. He was living in a small apartment in Columbus under his real name for the first time in decades. He was trying to build a legitimate life. As I drove home after that meeting, I realized something. I didn't love Daniel anymore. Maybe I never really had. Maybe what I'd loved was the idea of him, the simple life we'd built together. But the real Daniel, the man who'd kept so many secrets and made so many impossible choices, was a stranger to me now. And that was okay. I didn't need to love him or hate him. I just needed to let him go. A year after the arrests, my life had settled into something resembling normalcy. We'd moved out of the Lakewood house, too many memories, too much trauma, and into a modest 3-bedroom in Cleveland Heights. It had a small yard where I planted roses, a kitchen with enough space for family dinners, and enough distance from our old lives that we could breathe. Lily was 15 now, starting to think about colleges and her future. She developed an interest in criminal justice, inspired by everything we'd been through. She talked about becoming a lawyer, helping other people fight back against corruption and abuse. I was so proud of her strength, her resilience. Mason was 12, playing soccer and doing well in school. He was quieter than he'd been before everything happened, more serious. But he smiled more often now. He'd stopped having the nightmares that had plagued him for months after the arrests. And me. I was learning who I was outside of being someone's wife, someone's victim, someone's pawn. I was Emma Foster, though I'd legally changed my name back to my maiden name, Emma Walsh. I was a survivor. A mother. A woman who'd been broken and put herself back together stronger than before. The bearer bonds Daniel had left me had changed our lives in practical ways. With careful management, the money meant I didn't have to worry about bills, could save for the kids' college, could afford therapy and a good school district and all the things that had seemed impossible a year ago. But more than the money, Daniel had left me something else, proof that I was worth protecting. Worth fighting for. Worth saving. That knowledge, more than anything, had helped me rebuild. I'd started dating again, nothing serious, just coffee with a nice man from work, dinner with someone Carl had introduced me to. I wasn't ready for anything serious, and maybe I never would be. But it was good to remember that I was still a person, still someone worthy of affection and attention. The media attention had mostly died down, though occasionally someone would recognize me and ask questions. I'd learned to smile politely and change the subject. My story wasn't entertainment. It was my life. One Saturday afternoon, I was in the kitchen making lunch when there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and saw a young woman, maybe 30, with blonde hair and a nervous expression. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" "Are you Emma Walsh?" the woman asked. "Emma Foster, I mean." "Yes," I said warily. "Who are you?" "My name is Rebecca Sullivan," she said, and my blood ran cold. I was Marcus Foster's first wife. Lily and Mason's mother. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Rebecca was dead. She died in a car accident in 2014. I'd seen the death certificate during the divorce proceedings. You're supposed to be dead, I said bluntly. I know, Rebecca said. Can I please come in? I know this is a shock, but I need to talk to you. It's about the kids. Every instinct screamed at me to slam the door, to call the police, to protect myself and my children from yet another impossible complication. But something in Rebecca's eyes, fear, desperation, hope, made me step back and let her in. We sat in my living room, this stranger who was supposed to be dead, and she told me a story that turned everything I thought I knew upside down one more time. I didn't die in 2014, Rebecca said. Marcus tried to kill me. He tampered with my car. I found out later through a mechanic friend who examined the wreckage. The brakes had been cut. I survived because I happened to be going slow on a residential street when they failed. I swerved into a tree instead of into traffic. If you survived, why did everyone think you were dead? I asked. Because Marcus made sure of it, Rebecca said. He had connections even then, probably through the organization, though I didn't know about that at the time. He had someone at the hospital falsify records, declare me dead. I woke up 3 days later in a facility in Michigan, and a man I'd never met told me that if I ever contacted my children again, Marcus would finish the job. He'd kill me and make sure no one found the body this time. I felt sick. So you stayed hidden? Let your children think you were dead. What else could I do? Rebecca asked, tears streaming down her face. I had no money, no resources, no proof of what Marcus had done. And I knew what he was capable of. He'd already tried to kill me once. If I fought him, he'd win. So I changed my name, moved far away, and I've spent the last 11 years working minimum wage jobs and crying myself to sleep every night because I missed my babies. Why come forward now? I asked. Because he's in prison, Rebecca said simply. Because he can't hurt me anymore. And because I saw the news coverage. I saw you fighting for them, protecting them. I saw that they were safe with you. But they're my children, Emma. I gave birth to them. I love them. And I need, her voice broke. I need them to know I didn't abandon them. That I wanted them. That I've been fighting to find a way back to them for 11 years. I sat back, my mind racing. This was impossible. This was too much. How could any of us, survive another revelation, another complication? But then I thought about Lily and Mason, about how they'd grieved their mother. About how they told me sometimes that they couldn't remember what she looked like, couldn't remember her voice. About how they'd asked me if I thought their real mom would have loved them. And I knew what I had to do. They're not home right now, I said. Lily's at soccer practice, Mason's at a friend's house. But they'll be back in a few hours. If you want, if you're ready, you can wait here. You can see them. Rebecca's face crumpled. You'd let me, even though you're their mother, I finished. Yes. They deserve to know the truth. They deserve to have you in their lives if you're really here, if you're really ready to be part of their lives. I am, Rebecca said fervently. I am. I know I can't just walk in and be their mom again. I know they probably don't even remember me. But Emma, if I could just see them, just talk to them, just let them know that I loved them. You can, I said. But Rebecca, you need to understand, I'm their mother now too. I raised them. I fought for them. I love them just as much as you do. I'm not giving them up. I'm not asking you to, Rebecca said quickly. I'm just asking for a chance to be part of their lives in whatever way they'll let me. So we waited together, this woman who'd been erased and me, the woman who'd replaced her. We drank coffee and talked about Lily and Mason, what they were like, what they loved, who they'd become. Rebecca cried when I told her about Lily's interest in law, about Mason's soccer skills. She'd missed so much. When the kids came home, I met them at the door. There's someone here to see you, I said gently. Someone you're going to have a hard time believing is real. But I need you to keep an open mind, okay? They looked at me with confusion and a little bit of fear. They'd learned to expect the impossible from me, and followed me into the living room. When Rebecca stood up, turning to face them, Mason gasped. "Mom," he whispered. "Is that?" "It's me, baby," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. "It's really me. I'm alive. I'm here. And I've missed you so, so much." What happened next was beautiful and heartbreaking and complicated. Lily ran to her first, crashing into her with a force that nearly knocked them both over. Mason followed, and the three of them stood there crying and holding each other, and I stepped back to give them space. I should have felt jealous. I should have felt threatened. But all I felt was relief. Relief that these kids who'd lost so much, who'd been through so much, were getting something back. A piece of themselves they'd thought was gone forever. Yes, it would be complicated. Yes, we'd have to figure out custody and visitation and how to blend our lives together. Yes, there would be hard conversations and difficult moments ahead. But watching them together, watching Rebecca hold her children for the first time in 11 years, I knew we'd figure it out. We'd survived Marcus. We'd survived the organization. We could survive this too. Because that's what we did. We survived. We adapted. We found ways to keep going. And maybe, just maybe, we'd even find a way to be happy. 6 months after Rebecca came back into our lives, we'd found a rhythm. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about our situation was perfect. But it worked. Rebecca had gotten a job in Cleveland and moved into an apartment nearby. She saw the kids 3 times a week. Dinner on Tuesdays, lunch on Saturdays, and a few hours on Sunday afternoons. Slowly, carefully, she was rebuilding relationships with Lily and Mason. It wasn't easy for any of us. Lily struggled with anger at Rebecca for staying away so long, even though she intellectually understood why Rebecca had done it. Mason had nightmares sometimes where he'd wake up convinced Rebecca had disappeared again. And I had to learn how to share the children I'd fought so hard for, had to accept that being their mother didn't mean being their only mother. But we were trying. And most of the time, we were succeeding. The day we'd all been waiting for, and dreading, finally came in March. Marcus's appeal had been denied. His 35-year sentence was final. There would be no more court dates, no more hearings, no more chances for him to manipulate the system or find some loophole to exploit. He was going to prison, and he was going to stay there. Lily and Mason had chosen not to visit him. The therapist said it was their decision to make, that they shouldn't feel obligated to maintain a relationship with someone who'd hurt them so badly. So they wrote him letters instead, brief, formal letters explaining that they loved him but couldn't forgive him, that they needed space and time and maybe someday they could have some kind of relationship but not now. Not yet. Possibly not ever. Marcus never responded to the letters. I didn't know if that was because he was angry, or ashamed, or simply because he had nothing to say. I found I didn't care much either way. Marcus was in my past now. A chapter that was closed. Daniel, on the other hand, had become an unexpected part of our present. He'd asked if he could meet Lily and Mason, explain his role in everything that had happened. I'd been hesitant, but the kids had been curious. They'd wanted to meet the man who'd been their stepfather, who'd died and come back to life, who'd orchestrated the downfall of the organization that had destroyed so many lives. So one Saturday, Daniel had come to the house for coffee. It had been awkward at first. What do you say to a man who'd been dead for 6 years of your life? But Daniel had been patient and honest. He'd answered their questions, apologized for the pain he'd caused, and told them stories about his life with me before they were born. By the end of the visit, Mason had said, "You're kind of cool." In a really weird, spy movie kind of way. "I'll take that," Daniel had said with a laugh. We didn't have regular contact with Daniel after that. But knowing he was alive, knowing he was okay, gave me a sense of closure I hadn't expected to find. The roses I'd planted in our new yard had bloomed for the first time. I sat on the back porch one evening in May, watching the sunset paint the sky pink and gold, and I thought about everything I'd survived. I'd lost an $11 million mansion and gained a modest 3-bedroom house that was actually mine. I'd lost a husband who'd never really loved me and gained freedom from his manipulation. I'd lost custody of children who weren't biologically mine and fought until I got them back, forming bonds stronger than any DNA test could measure. I'd lost my sense of who I was and found someone better, stronger, more resilient. The path from that courtroom where Marcus had laughed to this porch where I sat in peace hadn't been straight. It had been twisted, painful, full of revelations I'd never wanted and truths I'd never expected. But I'd walked it. I'd survived it. And now, finally, I was ready to live again. Not just survive, live. The back door opened and Lily stepped out. She'd grown so much in the past year and a half. Taller, more confident, more herself. "Hey, Mom," she said, sitting down beside me. "Rebecca's on the phone. She wants to know if it's okay if she takes Mason to that new science museum next Saturday." Mom. She called me Mom. Even with Rebecca back in their lives, even knowing the truth about biology and custody and complicated family dynamics, Lily still called me Mom. "That's fine with me," I said. "As long as Mason wants to go." "He's already packing a backpack," Lily said with a laugh. "He's been talking about that museum for weeks." We sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset. Finally, Lily spoke again. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Always," I said. "Do you ever wish none of this had happened? That you'd never married Marcus, never found Daniel's evidence, never had to go through any of it?" I thought about that question carefully. A year ago, I would have said yes immediately. Yes, I wished I could go back, make different choices, avoid all the pain. But now? No, I said honestly. Because if none of it had happened, I wouldn't have you and Mason. I wouldn't be the person I am now. And yeah, it was horrible. It was traumatic and painful, and there were days I didn't think I'd survive. But I did survive. We all did. And we're stronger for it. Lily nodded slowly. That's what Dr. Chen says too. That trauma can be transformative if we let it teach us instead of destroy us. Dr. Chen is a smart woman, I said. You're pretty smart too, Lily said, leaning against my shoulder. For surviving all this. For fighting for us. For not giving up even when everything seemed impossible. I put my arm around her, pulling her close. I couldn't give up. You and Mason were worth fighting for. You still are. You always will be. We sat there until the sun disappeared below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. Inside, I could hear Mason and Rebecca talking on the phone, his excited voice explaining something about dinosaurs and space rocks. Normal sounds. Happy sounds. The sounds of a life rebuilt from ashes. I'd started this story in a courtroom, watching my world fall apart. I'd found a hidden room in a basement, uncovered secrets that changed everything, and fought against criminals and conspiracies and the man who tried to destroy me. And I'd won. Not because I was particularly strong or brave or special, but because I'd refused to stay a victim. Because I'd used every resource I could find, the evidence Daniel left, the bearer bonds, the allies I'd made along the way, to fight back. Because I'd loved my children more than I'd feared my enemies. The war was over now. Marcus was in prison. The Volkov organization was dismantled. Daniel was building a new life. Rebecca was back. And me. I was finally, genuinely, completely free. Free to be whoever I wanted to be. Free to build whatever future I could imagine. And that, more than any mansion or any amount of money or any perfect family structure, was everything I'd ever wanted. As I stood to go inside, to join my children and start making dinner, I looked back at the roses blooming in the garden. They'd been planted in darkness, in the depths of my despair. But they'd grown strong and beautiful, reaching toward the light. Just like me. Just like all of us. The story that had started with loss and betrayal ended with growth and hope. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Asterisk if you've stayed with this story until the end, thank you. To everyone who survived betrayal, who's fought for their children, who's rebuilt their lives from nothing. This story is for you. You're stronger than you know. Drop a comment sharing your story, or just to let me know you made it to the end. And check the description for more stories like this, because everyone deserves to know they're not alone. Asterisk.